So this is the Harwood family tree from William Harwood. So we have Wendy, Rodney, Jean and Anthony, Mum Nancy and Dad William Harwood. And we've got the Sewells down the bottom here, clockmakers from Bradford, and the Laws who hail from Cheshire. And then we have the Greens who also come from Cheshire. But we're going to concentrate on the Harwoods. So if we follow the line back through Henry to John, and if I just expand that and then bring this in, we go to a William, Edmund, William and John, and then expand further, and then we get to a Richard. So that's as far back as we get on the Harwoods. But if we just go back here to William Harwood, so let's have a look how far back we go. So if we've got William Thomas there, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations back from Wendy and Jean, we get to William Harwood in 1747 and an Alice Osbaldeston born 1752. They get married, and the rest is history, coming back this way. But if we trace Alice's line back, we come to John, Henry, Edward, and then again if I just expand that, it just expands it even more. So if I then drag this back in, we come to Edward the Osbaldeston. So you've noticed that there is a crest there. So there's a reason why there's a crest, in that his name actually should be preceded by Sir. So this is the first instance we get of any significance in the family. And so again, if I just drag that to the side and click on Edward here, then we come back to when it really starts to hot up. Because what we have here is the Osbaldestons here and other lines here. Now Christopher Southworth, by the way, and Richard Southworth are, again, the crest should give the game away because he's a Sir and he's from Samlesbury. So Samlesbury Hall is quite close to Preston. In fact, it takes us about 15 minutes to get there. So you can look it up on the internet. Samlesbury Hall, oh, that's yours, or at least it was a few hundred years ago. But if we look down below here, John Osbaldeston's and getting married to Margaret Stanley. Well, that's the key. The name Stanley is one of the significant names in English history, and her father was George Stanley, and again click on there, Lord. So Knowsley, where he was born, is just outside Liverpool. Liverpool at that time was just a small fishing port and nothing else, and he's a lord because he inherited part of the title from his wife, Joan Lestrange. So he's George Stanley, Lord Strange. So if we go back, just stick it on the Stanley side, sorry, on the Lestrange side, then we have John Lestrange, who's a baron from down in Shropshire, and a name that is quite significant again in English history, which is the Woodville, or Wideville as it's sometimes called. And Richard Wideville, Jacquetta's father, became an earl, the first Earl Rivers, and he married Jacquetta de Luxembourg, who was a princess. So up until his earldom being given to him, he was a middle ranking in the grand scheme of things. Now, Jacquetta had a sister called Elizabeth, who was also known as the White Queen in the books by Philippa, can't remember her surname, and she married King Henry IV. And so this line goes back, but we'll go back to the Stanley line, and in particular who George Lord Stanley's parents were, which was Thomas Stanley and Lady Eleanor Neville. Now we're talking serious nobility here with Lady Eleanor Neville. The Neville family are or were very, very prominent, and her brother was Richard Neville, otherwise known as the Kingmaker. He was the right-hand man of King Henry IV. And so Eleanor and the family, the Stanleys, the Woodvilles, the Beaumonts, the Beauforts were all involved in the War of the Roses. And we can follow the Neville line back a few more centuries, which I shall just quickly do. And here's where we start to get interesting, because Richard Neville's parents were Ralph Neville and Joan Beaufort. But what's more important is that Joan Beaufort's father was John of Gaunt, who happened to be the third son of King Edward III, who was married to Philippa Hainault. Now, every royal family in Europe can trace their ancestry back to Philippa Hainault, such as the intermarriage that took place. So she is probably the key mother in all history of this time as far as the nobility is concerned. So King Edward III was the son of King Edward II. Edward I, Henry III, King John, aka of the Magna Carta fame, King Henry II, and if we click up further, then we come to Geoffrey the Fourth Plantagenet, who was the Count of Anjou, which is in France, or what is now France, and his wife was Matilda, so who became Empress Matilda. That is Empress of the Holy Roman Empire, a very powerful lady, and she was the daughter of Matilda of Scotland and of King Henry I. And Henry I was one son of one certain Norman conqueror, otherwise known as William the Conqueror. Now, if we follow William the Conqueror's line back through Robert the Magnificent, you've got to love that title, then we come to Normandy. So we have these people here are Dukes of Normandy, and then we come to Rollo the Viking, Duke of Normandy. But if we just go back and follow the line from Matilda of Flanders, we can go this way and we get Baldwin, Arnulf, and then we come to Ealdrith of Wessex, who was the daughter of King Alfred the Great of Wessex, the first proper King of England, as such a united England. Aethelwulf, Ecbert. Now, if we go in the other line, we get Charles the Bald, Holy Roman Empire, Louis the Pious, and one of the mass murderers of his day, Charlemagne, Holy Roman Empire, or Emperor, and the line does go on to 580, so it does go on a fair way. So if we just go all the way back, keep going all the way back to Philippa Haino, and then if we go back this way, we get people from Luxembourg, Baldwin of Flanders, and if we keep going down this route, we can go back a fair way keep on going back, and we come to Hugh Capet, King of the France. So he was the first king of what was to become the dominant family. And as you see, we come back to Rollo, the Viking Duke. So we have multiple sources to get back to basically what is the same great grandparent, and we find that time and time again in the family tree. And if we click on the Luxembourg line, then we can see that there's quite a lot of family history on the continent of all areas of Europe. And so it all stretches back to the marriage of William Harwood and Alice Spaldeston. So we go through most of the kings and queens of England. Now if I just change how Ancestry displays the families, this will be a little bit difficult to see, but I'll expand it in a little while when we can get up here. So we're back with coming down the Spaldeston line. There's Sir Edward again. Just keep going back until we come to the Stanley name. Now, so here's the Stanley line, and so what I showed you before was coming in via Joan Lestrange and George Stanley, Eleanor Neville and Thomas Stanley up here. So what we find is that as well as coming in this line, you also have a link coming up this line to James and coming up this line through John. So Sir Thomas Stanley is, well, let's just pull it up. Is your 15th great grandfather, but he's not your great grandfather 15 times, he's your 3 times great grandfather, or 3 times 15th great grandfather, in that we're, of all of the myriad of great grandfathers you have at the 15th line, we found links to him on 3 separate occasions. So that's something to struggle to get your head round at times. So let's just recap that again. So we come in down this line via John to Sir Thomas, we come in down this line to Sir Thomas, and we come in down this line to Sir Thomas and Joan. So that's 3. So as well as this being your great-grandparent, he's one of your great-grandparents, and so is this is one of your great-grandparents, but is also an uncle. Right, so hope that makes sense, and so that's given you a flavour of the family tree as it is and the complexities that we have found so far. So finally I shall just recap that we come in by William Harwood marrying Alice Osbaldeston. This is Henry Osbaldeston coming down the line here into Sir Edward, and then we keep coming down the Osbaldeston lines until we come to the name Stanley, and then we come down the Stanley line until we get to the Nevilles, and then down the Neville line, expanding that, and then hey presto we come to John of Gaunt, the 3rd son of King Edward III. So this is the first time in the family tree that we find a king of England in the Harwood tree. And just as a final side issue, Joan Beaufort and Catherine Swynford are both buried in Lincoln Cathedral, and as it happens, Wendy and I were there a couple of years ago and saw their tombs. If we can find some photos of them, we shall send them on to. And a final reminder that Philippa Hainault is the mother of all Europe. So hope that gives you a flavour of the family